Welcome to part 1 of the entire plot of Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. You guys know the drill, I'm doing the entire series, but there is something we need to address before we get started today. I am a huge advocate for not reading Assassin's Blade first. I beg you, if you take anything from my channel, it is that. I explain it a lot more in this vlog, so you can definitely go watch that, I'll link it below. I will be referring to the first 3 books of the series, so even if you disagree with me and you think you should read Assassin's Blade first, if you've read Assassin's Blade in none of these other books, please turn away right now. Of course, I'll be making a lot of connections in Assassin's Blade to these first 3 books that you would not have picked up if you read Assassin's Blade first. There's not many that we're going to be covering in today's video, but there will be more later on. Then, of course, I'm going to be doing Queen of Shadows next, then the tandem read. Yes, I'm going to be doing the entire plot of the tandem, not just the 2 books separately, and then Kingdom of Ash. So definitely subscribe if you want to see the entire plot breakdowns of the rest of the books. Last thing, and then we can finally get started. I was really struggling to think of how to break up these books, and I just decided since there are 5 mini books inside of this book, each book is going to get its own video with the exception of the first 2, which is what we're going to be going over today. Today we're going to be reading The Assassin and the Pirate Lord as well as The Assassin and the Healer, but they are the first mini stories in the Assassin's Blade book. Chapter 1 of The Assassin and the Pirate Lord. That's hard to say. So chapter 1, we are in the Assassin's Keep with Selena in her true assassin form at the age of 16. So this takes place about 2 years before Throne of Glass Book 1. So Arobin Hamel, the king of the Assassin's Keep, has assembled all of his best and brightest assassins together. Turns out Grigori was on a mission and it went wrong and he was caught. Selena immediately calls that they should have another assassin go in and have him killed, just so that he can't spill any information about the Assassin's Keep. But Sam speaks up in opposition to this plan. We're gonna get a little bit more into Sam's life story later. I know it's briefly mentioned here, but it just makes more sense to delve into it later. So apparently, Ben, who was another assassin, was involved in Grigori's mission for whatever reason, but he actually got killed in the crossfire on this mission. They tried, but for whatever reason, the assassins who went to go retrieve Ben's body failed. Which ticks Selena off because she was not asked to do it, and she was very close to Ben, we find. Sam tries to pick a fight with Selena because she's basically saying that,
"I'm better than you, I could have done this, and the fact that you didn't just says a lot about your abilities as an assassin."
So it's a little petty, if you will. When Sam puts his hand on his pommel to pull a sword out on Selena, Arobin Hamel basically says,
"Go to your room and think about what you did."
Arobin definitely has some favoritism towards Selena. And as Sam is walking out, Selena informs them all that she's going to show them how it's done, and she leaves and she goes to retrieve Ben's body. Chapter 2. It is 2 months, 3 days, and 8 months later, and Sam and Selena are waiting to meet Captain Pirate Lord Ralph in his office in Skulls Bay. And we find out they're going to be here on this mission for 3 days. Now, before we go into what the mission is exactly, let's take a minute and talk about Selena's mask, because it does come up a good bit in this short story. So Selena's mask is a full coverage face mask that completely hides her identity, but it also distorts her voice, which I think is pretty cool. This is to keep Selena's identity a secret because the Assassin's Keep is actually smack in the middle of Aderlin, so she is able to walk around just like any other citizen, but that's because her identity is a secret. This is where I will emphasize she is the most notorious assassin, and I know some people like to joke that if you're notorious and a widely known assassin, that means you're a sucky assassin. It's more like her name is notorious, but people actually don't know what she looks like. You could know everything there is possibly to know about Selena Sardothian and then be talking directly to her and have no clue, because that is how well hidden her identity is. Even the other assassins, like Sam, have made an oath to Arobin that they will never reveal Selena's identity. So this is a pretty big deal. Pretty much everyone just knows her name and that she's female, but nobody knows her hair, her face, or even her age, which is the funniest part. She is literally a 16-year-old girl. We actually find out in Throne of Glass that the King of Aderlin, when she was caught, he actually claims that she was way older than she was to make himself look less bad, that he was beefing with a 16-year-old girl for years. Anyways, I just think that's a little funny. Okay, so as for the mission, 3 assassins of the Assassin's Keep were killed by the hands of Ralph's pirate men. So they've been sent by Arobin to receive penance for these 3 deaths in the form of gold. So in this situation, Selena is the weapon and Sam is the one who has his head on straight, because although she's definitely more skilled in combat, she can be pretty emotional about combat, and she does really like to jump into action. She loves to instigate problems and really just to pick fights. So Sam is there to make sure that she does what she needs to do, but she also stays on mission. Selena's a little offended because they've been sitting in Captain Ralph's office for a little while and he's still not there. Selena decides to take this as permission to not only sit in his desk chair, but just start going through his desk and reading his personal letters. Ralph eventually comes in, and of course he's very ticked off that Selena's just kind of like rummaging through his things and reading his stuff, but she remains seated there while Sam introduces himself and he introduces Selena. During this whole like introduction interaction, Selena's eyes immediately go to Ralph's hand. He has a very infamous magic tattoo on his hand. It's basically a living tattoo that is a map of the ocean, and not only just the ocean, but it charts any natural disasters as they're coming in and out. It shows him where his enemies are, and it shows him where treasure is. So if you ask me, that's pretty cool. And Selena is obviously very fascinated by this tattoo and has a lot of questions, but she decides to keep them to herself for now. But they need to make negotiations with this man, so Selena decides to finally get out of his chair so they can start negotiating. Selena and Sam say that Arabin, in the place of the 3 deaths of the 3 assassins by Ralph's men, they want penance in the form of gold, whereas Ralph claims these were not his men as the attack happened at 3 a.m., so no one could have possibly seen the tattoos of the pirates that would have identified them as his men. All of his men have tattoos on their wrists, and he was basically saying that, sure, it may have been pirates, but you can't prove that they were my pirates. Anyway, so Selena hands over 2 sealed documents from Arabin to Ralph, and he opens them and reads them, and he basically laughs at them, and he was like,
"Your master's payment request is quite reasonable."
And then he says something about a trade agreement. So clearly Selena and Sam are not here to gather gold for penance for the murder of 3 assassins. They're here for a trade agreement, which seems a little odd. And then Ralph says, "I'll have my accountant draw up the necessary fees, but you'll have to tell Arabin that he can't expect any profits till at least the 2nd shipment, possibly the 3rd. And if he has an issue with that, then he can come down here himself to tell me." Selena has a red flag pop up in this moment, but Sam seems to be totally aware of this agreement, like he doesn't seem fazed at all. So I guess it's a good thing that Selena's wearing a mask so that no one can see her reactions. But Sam asks when the 1st shipment will be ready, and Ralph says that the slaves will be here in 2 days, ready for your departure the day after. Selena may murder people for a living, but she draws a line at slave labor. And she plays the part as none of this shocks her, but she is absolutely disgusted. She's extremely shocked. She's just totally thrown by this trade agreement. So her mind is spiraling about like, how in the world did we get to this point? And then Ralph reveals that he's been dealing in slave trading for 2 years now. So this all happens, and then Selena's like, okay, Sam and I will be going to our rooms now because they're staying there for 3 days. And unfortunately, this is not a 1-bed trope. It is a one room, but 2 beds. Chapter 3. 5 minutes into being into their room, Selena and Sam have already swept the place to make sure there's no like peepholes or anything where someone could see Selena's identity. And then Selena goes to blow Sam's head off, but he does cut her off, and he basically just says, "I have no clue about the slave deal. I was just pretending like I knew. I had no clue. What in the world are we going to do?" Something really funny here is that obviously Selena's biggest concern is the slaves, but she starts to spiral about the fact that Arabin lied to her. Now remember, in the book Heir of Fire, Selena talks about how Arabin is like shackles to her because not only did he ruin her life and make her the assassin that she is, but Arabin did save her life. Arabin is the only reason she's alive. So it was either like, would being an assassin be better than being dead kind of idea. Also, she was his favorite for the longest time, so she really reaped all the possible benefits of being an assassin to corrupt men at the time of war. So like, although she had a moral compass, she was able to kind of like ignore some of the moral issues of like her job, I guess. It's very complex morally, and I think that's what I do love about the Sarah J. Maas books is that the main character, she has a fatal flaw, and it is the fact that she is an assassin, but she has a moral compass. This is the first time, because remember, we're going back in time. This is the first time that Arabin has ever given her a reason to doubt. Also, something that's not sitting right with her is why would Arabin even need to get involved in the slave trade? Because Arabin is filthy rich. So later that night, they go to dinner, and Selena can't even eat anything because the mask is covering her mouth. And Ralph kind of did this on purpose. He really, really wants to see her face, and he is goading her like the entire dinner. And frankly, throughout this entire short story, he desperately wants her to take off the mask because he just needs to know. He's curious. Like, this is one of the most notorious assassins. He's spending 3 days with her. He really wants to know who she is. Ralph's like, okay, well, if you won't let me see your face, at least tell me your story. And she says, I trained. And then she basically says, some of us don't need a magic tattoo. Some of us had to climb to the top. And obviously this hits at Ralph's ego, but he corrects her. He says, no, I just killed everyone who was better than me. This man. He also says that he actually isn't depending on his tattoo to become the Pirate Lord of Skulls Bay because it hasn't worked for 8 years since magic disappeared. And of course we know because of both Crown of Midnight and Heir of Fire that is due to the king's anti-magic beacons. And that's enough about that dinner because it's really just Ralph and Selena like bickering the entire time. They get back to their rooms and Sam and Selena then bicker. And Sam thinks that Selena's too cocky and Selena thinks that Sam is too complacent. They don't like each other, guys. I cannot stress this enough. They can't stand each other. Chapter 4, Selena cannot sleep that night because she's thinking about the slaves. And she decides in this moment that she refuses to transport them and play any part in this slave trade. So she has 2 days to find a way to uproot both Arobin and Ralph's plan, and then on top of that, she needs to survive the attempt. She knows that Sam won't help her, so she has to be really sneaky about this. So Selena's walking around Skulls Bay with Ralph and basically like scouting out the island, but she's noticing how gnarly it is. Then as she's walking around, she notices 2 things that make Skulls Bay what Skulls Bay is, which is really, really good at trade. The first thing is called Shipbreaker, which is actually this really crazy giant chain that is extremely large, and it can literally snap a ship in half if it tries to pass over this chain, which is how Ralph controls who comes in and out of his port. There's a watchtower where there's this giant lever that kind of controls to like bring the chain down below the water so that a ship can pass over it, and that raises it back up if they don't want anyone coming in or out. The second thing is that there are 2 catapults also right next to this watchtower that if anyone for whatever reason somehow got past this shipbreaker, then the catapults would take the ships out. Selena then decides in this moment that she's gonna kind of pull the whole like Arobin's faithful servant. So she turns to Ralph and she says she wants to examine the quality of the goods, basically playing the role that she is totally in on this slave trade agreement. He says that all the slaves are being inspected and are being held in a facility so that she can join when he goes to check how the inspection's going. So the slaves that she's gonna go see that are being inspected right now are not actually her shipment. It's like a shipment that he's sending out for trade for something else entirely, and then Arobin's shipment of slaves is going to be the next group that comes. So they're going to be inspecting a different group of slaves. So her plan is that she's going to go check out these slaves and basically claim that they're not up to par, and then it's going to be easy and done. She'll just deal with Arobin being mad at her for it later. She goes back to the room before this inspection, and Sam's actually there, and he is ticked off that Selena was talking to Ralph when he wasn't present. And then the funniest part is that she tells him to like get over himself, like maybe I think the pirate's hot. Girl, be so for real. Sam sees right through her and says, "You think I can't tell when you're cooking up some scheme?" He knows her too well. They practically grew up together, so I'm not surprised. Chapter 5, it's later that night and they are ready to go to the holding facility to inspect the slaves with Captain Ralph. Yes, Sam is joining Selena this time because he can tell that something's not quite right with her. So they go inside and Selena is immediately faced with a crazy ton of cells full of 100 Eelway men, women, and even children, and they're just in the most horrible conditions. So they approach an Eelway man who's kind of at the end of all of these cells. He's around 20 and he's in chains. Ralph mentions that this guy, because he's strong and more handsome, he will most likely be used for hard labor, or he's technically handsome enough, he might be forced into the life of a courtesan. And I'll just tell you guys right now, this is honestly such a gut-wrenching and disgusting chapter, but that's why it makes the end of this short story so much better. So just bear with me here. Ralph then continues to talk about how 10 of the 100 in Arabin's shipment is going to be including children, which are mostly just good for selling to brothels. Now, this is where I'm going to give you a little bit more of Sam's backstory, because Sam is actually visually upset by this. Thankfully, I don't think Ralph notices, but Selena definitely does. So Sam's mother was a slave, and she was sold to a brothel and forced to become a courtesan. That's also when she had Sam by accident. While Sam was still pretty young, his mother was actually murdered by a very jealous client, but shortly before her death, because his mother knew Arabin, she made a deal with him. She basically said, "I'd rather my son grow up to be an assassin than a courtesan, so please take him." And Arabin did. So that's why Sam is an assassin and not a courtesan. But basically, you'll see that that's a theme in these books, is a lot of people who ended up in the Assassin's Keep, they had a choice between either death and being an assassin, or death and being a courtesan, or death and being an assassin or a courtesan. Very, very sad stuff. Anyways, so Selena's just asking questions, and she's positioning it in a way that it just seems that Arabin sent her because she's really like tough on the details. So Ralph's actually being pretty open with answering everything. Like, it doesn't even occur to him that she's trying to think of a way to, you know, sabotage this trade agreement. So he's actually telling her a lot of things, thinking that the trade's only going to happen if Selena's happy with it. So he is giving her basically all the information she's asking for. And it's kind of a risky question, but she does ask when this current shipment's going out, because it's not theirs. Without even thinking about it, just kind of shares like, "Oh, they're going to be going out the same time as yours, not that it matters." And she's like, "Yeah, you're so right, not that it matters." So the inspection is done. Selena decides to just march off to the beach. Sam is following quickly behind her. And once they get far enough from the facility, Selena does like take her mask off and all that just to like get a breath of fresh air, and no one's around. So like, don't worry, that's not going to be the plot twist here. That is the least of our worries right now. And Selena has a lot of pent-up frustration and anger, obviously, from everything that she's seen. So she just turns around and she starts brawling with Sam, but she's fighting really emotionally. So Sam's actually able to pin her down and basically begs her to just talk to him. Like, she's obviously not okay. Selena then shares that she can't allow it to happen and she's going to stop it. Not just the shipment like she originally planned, but she is going to free all of the slaves. Sam is shocked that she wants to do this, but also at the same time, he doesn't seem to disagree. And he basically just says, "You do realize both Arabin and Ralph are gonna kill you if you do this." She says that she's gonna do it anyways, and Sam says, "Okay, I guess I'm doing it with you." He says, "If we're going to die, it should be for a noble cause." So Selena and Sam, as much as they have hated each other their entire lives, they're going to team up together to free all 200 of these slaves. So Selena tells Sam her entire plan, which we're actually not privy to as the readers. That's just like Sarah J. Maas's writing style, which honestly I kind of prefer, because then when we get to see the plan in action, it's far more exciting if you don't know what's going to happen next. So that's just my opinion. Also, what happens after is really up for consideration. Sam suggests that they run away together because obviously, like, the chances of them surviving post freeing the slaves is very low, considering how both Arabin and Ralph do their business. Selena thinks it's an interesting suggestion, but she's also not saying no at the same time. But then what Sam says next is extremely interesting and something that you definitely should keep close to your chest and remember. Sam wonders if this is all bigger than just the slave trade. Sam thinks that Arabin wanted the two of them out of Aderlin because this mission is well below their skill set, and although Selena's definitely number one, Sam's probably number two when it comes to skills at the Assassin's Keep. And if that doesn't get your gears turning, he also says that he doesn't think that Ben's death was an accident or that the mission actually failed. He thinks that it went wrong for other reasons. Very interesting. So the examination of their actual shipment, so they examined the other shipment just to see what the slave quality is, but their shipment actually gets in tomorrow morning. So Sam's going to sleep for the night, and Selena decides that she's going to walk along the beach and just kind of process everything before the examination tomorrow. Guys, when I tell you, okay, this next part, let's talk about it. This is why you cannot read this book first. When I tell you, reading this paragraph just gave me absolute chills. And if you're reading this book first and you don't know Selena, all of this falls flat. Like, it just seems like a random paragraph. Okay, let me just read it. This is like a shortened version of the paragraph. She walked until a surprisingly cold breeze swept past her, and she halted. Slowly, Selena turned north towards the source of the breeze, which smelt of a faraway land she hadn't seen in 8 years. Pine and snow. A city still in winter's grasp. She breathed it in, stared across the leagues of lonely black ocean, seeing somehow that distant city that had once long ago been her home. Back then, she hadn't any choice. When Arabin offered her this path, it was either that or death. But now, she took a shuddering breath. No. She was as limited in her choices as when she was 8 years old. She was Aderlin's assassin, and she always would be. Guys, do you realize what we just read? It was in this moment that Selena was debating freeing the slaves and then pursuing being Aelin. Look, I don't know what Sarah J. Maas puts in her coffee, but this kind of writing is insane. We literally get a peek at Selena considering being Aelin again in the prequel, which is the 4th book, I believe, that Sarah J. Maas wrote in this series, in an 8-book series. That is bonkers. I don't care what you say. Chapter 6, Selena and Sam are walking through the island together the next morning, pretending like they're just exploring, when they're really scouting out the layout of their plan. And they actually do learn a lot. We're also not really privy as to what they learn, but they basically solidify their plan before they have to examine the shipment, which, by the way, that's what we're doing now. So we're gonna go examine the first shipment of Arabin's slaves. There's actually only 93. Selena asks where the other 7 are, but Ralph says that they died on the journey there. And I mean, gross. I hate this man. Like, let's be honest. He is so gross. So Sam then asks where the slaves are from yesterday that they saw, and Ralph dumbly points out the ship next to theirs. So, like, there's a lot of reasons why Ralph answering their questions makes sense, but there have been 2 questions now, and I believe those are the only 2 ones. But there were 2 questions asked now that should have thrown off Ralph. Like, he should have had a red flag in his head when those questions were asked, but that's just me. Then, in an almost comedic way, Selena starts drilling Ralph on all the security on the slaves. She wants to make sure that the shipment is secure and all of this stuff, and so he basically starts walking her through the security detail. Listen, I mean, good for them. Then, where we start to kind of see the plan come into place is Selena then asks which of the slaves can speak the common tongue. Her claiming is that they want to see who's going to be the most high-value slaves because people are more likely to buy a slave that can speak their language. And only one of the slaves of the 97 speak up. So all of these people are about to be sold into slavery to serve people that speak a language they don't know. Sorry, I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. Dia, I believe is how you pronounce his name, but Dia reveals that he is a bilingual slave, and he will play a very big part in this escape plan. So remember our good buddy Dia. So it's hours later, Ralph is no longer with them, and it is officially go time on this plan. Sam and Selena hopped into little rowboats, and they're both gonna go to the opposite ships. So Sam is gonna go to the other shipment, while Selena's gonna go to Arabin's shipment. So they're the 2 ships that are right next to each other. And the reason why they're able to get away with this is they caused a commotion by spreading a rumor all throughout the island. The big tavern that everyone loves and goes to, well, all of the ale that night is gonna be on the Pirate Lord Ralph's tab. So naturally, the entire island is at the tavern that night. And because of that, the security is at the absolute bare minimum. So the biggest concern that Selena has as they're rowing to the boat is she's looking at this watchtower. They need to get in there and bring down Chainbreaker, but then also disable the catapult so that both of these ships can get free. And then on top of that, the seas around Skulls Bay are insanely difficult to navigate. So a lot needs to happen in order for this plan to go well, basically. Chapter 7, Selena's gotten to her ship and Sam has gotten to his. They've given each other the signal and they have started just cranking through the ship, basically taking out every single guard in their way. She then makes it to the slaves' cargo chamber where they've all been chained to the floor with no light, no food, no water. It's literally just disgusting conditions. So she's looking for Dia, our bilingual slave, and she takes off his shackles and then asks him to translate for her. She gives him the key that she picked off one of the guards and says, I want you to unlock everyone's shackles and tell them that they're being set free. For now, they need to stay put until Sam and Selena cause a commotion on the island. Then, as soon as a sliver of the sun is visible on the horizon, right at dawn, and this is important because obviously they need to navigate the worst parts of the ocean in the daylight, but then also they need to be able to catch the tide. At that point, they are going to make a run for it. She says, don't worry about Shipbreaker, don't worry about the catapults. Sam and I are going to take care of that. Just stay put, stay quiet, don't do anything that's going to draw attention to the ships until you see that sliver of daylight, and then you're all going to pop the oars out the bottom of the boat and you guys are going to absolutely gun it for the ocean. Dia then assures her that they will work out the specifics for themselves, but then thanked her for providing the keys and as well as a distraction. I almost forgot, then Selena and Dia hop on that little rowboat and they go over to the other ship where Dia then gives the message to the other slaves as well because there was no one bilingual on that ship. Chapter 8, Sam and Selena have joined Ralph and his men at the tavern, and everyone is crazy drunk because of all of the rumors that everything is on Ralph's tab. So there's this funny little thing that happens that you'll want to remember for future books, but Ralph and Selena make a deal. Ralph will tell Selena the story behind his tattoo the day that she reveals her face and her true identity. So remember that. That's a fun little tidbit for you. She then pulls out a type of game cards, and basically everyone in the tavern is just gambling the night away, having a good time, drinking a lot, and Sam and Selena are like pretending to drink and be very drunk when obviously they're very, very sober because this plan needs to go well. Then the night gets wild, and I'm gonna quote this directly from the book because it's just too good. So Selena trips a passing pirate who spilled his drink on an already belligerent man who in turn tried to punch him in the face but hit the man next to him instead. By luck at that moment, a trick card fell out of a man's sleeve and a prostitute slapped a pirate wench and the tavern exploded into a brawl. That's very descriptive. I can practically imagine it in my brain. So now everyone's fighting and it's pure chaos, and Selena decides to join the brawl, and her whole thing is that she's just like slipping through the crowd, and obviously she's not gonna like unalive anyone because that's not why she's here. She's basically just like going through and just like punching people and then running away, just to kind of like add to the chaos and keep the chaos going. And then once her and Sam are pretty sure that things are wild enough, she books it. So now all they need to do is disarm Shipbreaker and they need to disarm the catapults. But they run into Captain Ralph. Chapter 9. So apparently Ralph saw Selena trip the man at the tavern and cause the chaos, so that kind of clued him in that something was going on. Selena sees a sliver of light in the distance. It is dawn. Also, Shipbreaker and the catapults are still barriers to the slaves escaping in the ships. But then at that moment, the ships start to move and Selena's like praying that Ralph doesn't see, but of course he does. However, in this moment, Selena, in a bit of a panic, thinks, what's gonna distract this man? How about the fact that he's been bested by a 16-year-old girl? So she whips off her mask. And sure enough, he hesitates for 1 second. It's just enough time for Sam to book it and get past Ralph. But yeah, no, Ralph is very, very mad about this new information. And then once he realizes that Sam's gotten past, he decides to start screaming to the guards for help. Now, mind you, everyone that he's screaming to get help from is extremely drunk, and they're all very beat up from brawling with each other. It's not really much of a challenge for Sam and Selena to like outrun these people, but it still adds another barrier. And then Selena and Ralph start fighting, and he clearly has also been faking being drunk because he is tip-top shape in this fight. So the fight gets pretty ugly and they both get a couple slashes in, but Selena's quicker than him and knocks him out by whacking him in the back of his head with the pommel of her sword. All the other pirates are now trying to stop Selena and Sam, but like I said before, they are all way too drunk to actually be a true barrier. It's just more like an annoyance. So Sam has only a couple minutes left to get the chain down before the ships go right over it. So Selena is running for her life to get to this watchtower, and she sees Sam in the distance. He makes it to the watchtower, but once he gets to the top, there's a bit of an issue. He's not pulling the lever because the lever was designed to need multiple men to pull on it in order for it to work. It was not designed for one man to pull it and chain breaker go down. So that's something they failed to consider. But Sam then has an idea. He jumps down from the watchtower and he goes over to the catapults. He rotates them so that they're pointing at the watchtower with the lever on it, and he uses the catapult to absolutely demolish the watchtower and the chains lever with it. But in doing so, the whole thing absolutely collapses onto Sam. That's a lot. We'll get there in a second. Thankfully, though, the chain falls just in time due to Sam's sacrifice, and the slaves are able to get away. Selena obviously has a moment of relief where she is happy for the slaves for getting away, but then she realizes that Sam is probably dead. So she goes to run to see if she can try to find his body and see if it's not too late to save him, when she's stopped by Ralph, who I guess is no longer knocked out. Chapter 10, Ralph says he wants to kill her nice and slowly because she just cost him 200 slaves, 2 nice ships, and then naturally, because Selena is afraid of nothing, she goes, oh, and don't forget, everyone was drinking on your tab tonight in the tavern. I swear, she just is so unapologetically just petty. So then they brawl again, because why not? And there's just lots of brawling in this book, so I'll just set it straight for you right now. You're not gonna get a play-by-play from me. You're gonna get who wins and what important injuries occur. So Selena beats Ralph and then gives him 2 papers that she wrote up herself in his handwriting, and he is to sign them and mark them with his seal. One is a letter to Arabin that the deal is over, that there are no slaves, and that he will be punished if he ever hears word that Arabin is participating in the slave trade. The second one is a letter supposedly written by Ralph, vowing that he will never sell a slave again, and he will put it into pirate law that the slave trade is illegal, and that Skulls Bay will actually become a slave sanctuary to any slaves who escape the continent. Obviously, he refuses to sign, but she informs him that it doesn't matter, because remember in chapter 1 when she was rummaging through his desk, she wasn't just reading his letters, she was studying his handwriting, not only so she could write the letters and make it look like he wrote them, but also so that she could forge his signature. Also, when she was going through the desk, she snatched his signet ring that he seals everything with. And then she presents him with 2 options. His options are to sign it himself and be a better man, or he can die right here, right now, and she'll sign it for him. He chooses to live and be a better man against his will, and he signs those papers. But he tells her if she ever steps foot on Skulls Bay again, then she will be killed on the spot. She then gets his signatures, and then she decides to knock him out so that she can have a couple minutes to find Sam's body, take a ship, and get back to Adderlin as soon as possible. She's looking through the rubble and has basically all but accepted that Sam is dead and gone forever, but then she hears his voice. He's quite literally been watching her dig through the rubble for his body. She's mad at him, but then she hugs him, and it's this cute little moment, and Selena's you know what, I hate you, but I think I hate you a little less than I thought I did. And now on to short story number 2, which is The Assassin and the Healer. Chapter 1, we're going to flash forward a little bit of time. This is a little while after Selena gets back from Skulls Bay. Selena is staying at the White Pig Inn owned by Nolan. Urine is a barmaid working at the White Pig. This chapter is going to be from her POV as well as majority of this short story. So she's observing Selena. Obviously, she doesn't know it's Selena, but we know it's Selena. And she's very observant and can actually tell a lot of things about her that we know from reading the books. Urine is a hard worker, but she's severely underpaid and mistreated by Nolan. She also has one other coworker who's also a barmaid named Jessa. Jessa sucks. That's all you really need to know. Also, we learn this, I think actually through Selena's eyes, but Urine is a very, very pretty girl. A lot of the men apparently who come to drink at the White Pig are pigs themselves, so she gets harassed by men at the White Pig. This is also where we learn that Urine's been working in this horrible condition for a year now, even though she only planned to stay for a month as a stop to her end destination, but she didn't make it very far. More on that later. Also, Jessa, the horrible coworker, she's extremely lazy, never helps Urine with anything, and she takes 2/3 of her pay. How in the world that happens, I'm not really sure. I think Nolan just kind of lets her because a lot of the men do come there for her because she actually likes the disgusting attention she gets from them, so to each their own, I guess. The White Pig is a tavern, but upstairs there's an inn, and Selena's actually staying in it. Because of that, Nolan knows that she has money, and he keeps telling Urine to keep stopping by her table and try to fill her up with ale and as much food and bread as possible so that they can try to squeeze as much gold out of her as possible. Selena's actually very kind and respectful to Urine, which she's not used to at all, so she really likes this mysterious girl. Now we're gonna jump to Selena's POV because not only does she hate the White Pig, but she hates the town that it is in general. She is here because of Arabin. Things have been quite rocky since she screwed up his slave trade agreement, and now Arabin is sending her to Yerba. And she's currently there waiting for a ship to come and take her to Yerba, but she's specifically going to the Red Desert. And she's going to train under the mute master of the silent assassins as punishment. That's actually what the entire next short story is about, so we won't go too deep into that now. But we find out that she is covered with a lot of new cuts and bruises, courtesy of Arabin, as punishment for freeing the slaves. So that's really frustrating. But Selena is obviously still very upset. Not only that the whole slave trade thing was even happening, but she's also kind of spiraling, because remember, we talked about this earlier. She was always Arabin's favorite, and now she's kind of fallen from his graces, and she doesn't know how to act. And she's also a 16-year-old girl, guys, okay? Like, I get she has a lot of responsibilities, and she's a notorious assassin and all, but she's still a 16-year-old girl. So she's very upset, she's very emotional, and she just wants to pick a fight with someone. She's like, I really could just beat someone up. Like, that's gonna make me feel better. So she's quite literally wearing like super expensive jewelry on display in hopes that someone will try to steal it or someone will try to pick a fight with her. Specifically, she's wearing a big red ruby brooch that Arabin gave her, like smack in the center of like her cape. This is also where Selena reveals that she technically is supposed to be gone for a while at the Red Desert, and she's wondering, she's like, you know what, if I took a ship somewhere else entirely and just new name, new identity, new life, months would go by before Arabin would even think to look for me. But there's Sam. She has not seen Sam since they got back from Skull's Bay. She has no idea where he is, what's going on. She doesn't know how Arabin punished him, and she just can't bear the thought of leaving him, considering he's only in this situation because he went along with her plan. Chapter 2, let's hop back in Urine's POV, because she can sense a shift in the tension in the White Pig, and all the men are eyeing this mysterious girl. So Urine wants to warn her, but she's afraid that she could lose her job by making everyone else there angry. But then it occurs to her, like, do I really want to keep this job? Like, it's miserable, and she hates it, frankly. But then she remembers her mother, and her mother would warn the girl without hesitation. Her mother, let's talk about her for a second, because her mother was a healer, and she healed everyone for free in Fenharo. Now, if you're like, wait, Fenharo, I've heard of that before. Fenharo was where Sorsha lived. In my head, I like to imagine that Sorsha and Urine grew up together and they knew each other and they were best friends. That's just me. But then, of course, as we know, based off what Sorsha told Dorian in The Crown of Midnight, the men of Adarlan came and they completely demolished all of Fenharo. It technically no longer exists. Anyone who was a healer or was known to be a healer was killed. Now, let me clarify something really quick, because some people think this is a plot hole, but if you know the books really, really well, then it makes sense. We know that Sorsha was a healer in the castle in Crown of Midnight, but you will learn more on later in the series that healers are taught the magic of Silva. Silva is the goddess of healing. There are two aspects of healing. There's a way to heal people using magic, but then there's a way to heal people using just kind of like what our typical nurses and doctors do at a real life hospital. So that is something to consider. We'll get into it a little bit later. Urine mentioned something about being a healer in Adarlan during the time that magic was supposed to be gone. There's non-magical ways to be a healer. There's also magical ways to be a healer. We'll learn later that the best healers know how to do a little bit of both and mix them both in. So her mother was a magical healer. But then, of course, magic disappeared, and her mother actually was still able to do non-magical healing, and she continued to heal. But when the men of Adarlan came, they didn't really seem to care what the difference was, and they came to kill Urine and her mother. Urine's mother basically yelled at her to run. Urine ran. Her mother died. Urine is still beating herself over it to this day. So that's kind of like her backstory in a nutshell. We can delve into it a little bit more later, but that's all you need to know for right now. So Urine's having this very sad emotional flashback to the death of her mother, but she snaps out of it when this slimy, crusty man starts making some unwanted advancements, but then she claims to be married so that he'll leave her alone, and she actually gets away with it because her mother had a ring that she actually kept. and it's like a family heirloom of all the women healers in her family. So she has like the special ring that kind of passes a wedding ring, so the guys are like, okay, dang it. And then she reminds them that the bar is closing in 40 minutes and then goes back to her duties. We're gonna jump to Celaena's POV. The tavern is closing, and she's low-key offended that no one picked a fight with her. So she debates walking the streets at night, just until someone tries something. She's kind of having this moment where she's thinking about when Sam asked her to run away with him, and she's starting to kind of wish that she had. But then she doesn't like that she's thinking about that, so she's like, you know what, I am gonna roam the streets at night, and I am gonna pick a fight. We're going to jump back to Urine's POV. She's working the closing shift. Technically, Jessa was supposed to stay and help her, but Jessa left with one of the sailors, so Urine's not expecting her back anytime soon. So she's kind of at that point in the closing shift where she's taking all like the waste and garbage from the day and taking it out into the back alley. As she's like in the back alley, kind of like throwing everything where it needs to go, she's thinking about how 8 years have passed since her mother's death. For the past 6.5 years before she came to the White Pig, she actually lived with a cousin, and then she decided that she wanted to be a healer like her mother. So she planned to go to the southern continents, specifically to a place called Antarctica, where there is a place called, I always call it the Tor. I know some people say the Torre. To me, Tor just makes more sense. So if you call it the Torre, when I say Tor, that's what I'm talking about. But it's a place where all the best healers in the world go to study healing. So she decided she wanted to go there. So she came to this city, but ran out of money. So she started working at the White Pig, planning to work there for a month to make enough money to get a ship to go to Antarctica. But then when she did make enough money to take the ship, she realized that she wouldn't have anything when she got there, and she can't just walk into the Tor and say, hey, train me to be the best healer in the world, without anything to offer them. So she decided to stay at the White Pig a little longer. She has not had money, nor will she ever get the money working at the White Pig to go become a healer at the Tor. So once again, she snaps out of this days thinking about all of her life decisions because she hears a noise. And look, I think it's kind of funny because at the very beginning, Celaena makes a comment about how alert this girl seems, and then there's literally so many situations where she gets herself in a crappy situation because she was not being alert. So she hears a noise, and I'll remind you, she's alone in an alley at night. So this is not very good. You don't want to be hearing noises when you're alone in an alley at night and a woman. 4 men who were actually at the tavern decide to come and attack her, and one of them even gets a knife to her throat. And then they say that they want her tips because they saw that she was getting some really good tips. So they ask for them, but then they hear a ruffle and 2 thumps. And the guy holding a knife to her throat turns around and sees Celaena standing there with 2 bodies of the 2 guys she just unalived on the ground. Chapter 3. Yrene actually anticipates a very big fight between Celaena and this burly man who just held a knife to her throat, but Celaena has him down in a second. Like, it's not even a challenge to her. Then the 4th man, because remember there were 4, he is a coward and he just runs away. So Yrene starts to beg for her life, like,
please don't kill me.
And Celaena's like, what would be the point of saving your life if I was gonna kill you? Like, I thought you were smart. You seemed really smart, but you're it's not giving smart right now. Celaena then makes a remark about being annoyed that the fight was too easy, because mind you, she's been begging for a fight, and then she finally gets one, and it's like she drops them all in seconds. It's like nothing to her. It's like asking a bodybuilder to drop and give you 2 push-ups. Like, it's nothing. But she is glad that at least the barmaid is safe. Yrene then points out Celaena's arm because apparently there's like a bloody cut on it, and then she asks to treat it for her. Celaena's technically very angry at the girl because she's like, how could you be so smart and alert but then go into a dark alley at night alone? And Celaena's about to turn her down when Yrene says, Silva knows what was on that blade. It is interesting that Yrene mentions Silva because she's considered like one of the old gods now, but she is the goddess of healing. So this kind of tells Celaena a lot about, you know, who this girl is, what she believes. So Celaena's like, you know what, if you're a healer or have healer in your blood, then sure, yeah, you can heal me. Chapter 4, Yrene is treating Celaena in her rooms and is surprised on how young Celaena is when she takes off her hood and her mask. She's also very shocked at the amount of cuts and bruises all over her face and the scars covering the rest of her body. She then introduces herself to Celaena as Yrene Towers, but Celaena does not introduce herself. Instead, she just asks how she ended up at the White Pig, Obviously, we already talked about Urine's story. Urine just retells her that whole story in different words. So Selena offers her some advice. Basically says life is not easy no matter where you are, and says that it would be better for Urine to be miserable in the Southern Isles with no money than to be miserable at the White Pig with no money. So she's got a point. Urine says she no longer has enough money to even hop on a boat when Selena suggests that she just steals the money that she needs. After all, Selena steals stuff all the time. But Urine says she will never take what isn't hers. She'd rather rot away at the White Pig with a clean conscience. This is very interesting to Selena, but then decides to ask her, like, okay, so let's say, hypothetically, you found your way into some money, you took a ship to the tour, you become a healer. You know, you train at the tour, you become an amazing healer, then what would you do? Urine says that she would go back to Adderlin. There are a lot of people who need good healers these days, especially in the continent where healing magic is gone. So she's gonna take all that time to learn all the beauty of healing in both of its magical and non-magical forms. And then she's gonna go to a place where magic is impossible. Just use her knowledge to treat people in non-magical ways. And then on top of that, she could be murdered if the king finds out that she ever trained at the tour, because if she's been trained in healing magic, she's considered a danger and she can be killed for it. Selena's actually surprised that she'd come back to a hostile continent, especially one that's so hostile to magic, but Urine just says it's the right thing to do. Urine finishes treating her arm and then offers her something for the cuts and bruises on her face, to which Selena tells her that they serve as reminders to me, so she would not like to have them healed. Then, as a thank you for healing her, Selena says that she's going to teach her self-defense. So they go down to the alley, and honestly, just insert a little training montage here in your brain, but I'm going to tell you some highlights, some tips per se, that Selena gives Urine. 1. Do not let them move you to another location. 2. Fight enough to convince them that you're not worth it. 3. Scream about a fire. More people will gather. 4. If they ever let you go, you run. 5. She teaches her some maneuvers that are going to use her tiny size to her advantage. And then the last and final tip that Selena more asks her than tells her, to share everything that Selena taught her that night with any girl who's willing to listen. Then Selena basically says, like, all right, well, I need to head to bed because I'm leaving for the Red Desert tomorrow, when 5 men approach them in the alley. Chapter 5, Selena orders Urine to basically step aside, and Selena just starts hacking through these men with a sword. So the mercenary who ran away, he basically just came back with more friends. But apparently there was a 6th man that they did not see, and he got behind Urine and was holding a knife to her throat. Selena stops fighting and drops her sword to the ground when the man tells her to. But it is in this moment that Urine realizes that she is not ready to die before she becomes a healer. So she like stomps on his foot, and then when he loosens his grip on her, then she does like one of the little maneuvers that Selena taught her. And then Selena, finishes the job for her, if you pick up what I'm putting down. Unfortunately, though, the knife that he had did leave like a pretty deep cut on Urine's neck. Obviously not enough to threaten her life, but deep enough to leave a scar. And Urine kind of has this moment where she was like, scars can serve as reminders, and she decides to keep that one as a reminder. But then she turns towards Selena and she was like,
You knew there was a 6th man. You knew he was coming up behind me. You let him hold a knife to my throat, and you totally could have rescued me.
And then Selena just goes, I wanted to see if you could put everything I taught you into practice. Hysterical. And then Selena goes back into the inn and goes back to her room. Chapter 6, Urine also goes to her rooms to basically clean up for the night, but then she realizes that it's just about time for her to start her opening shift. So she's tired from a long night and she's not going to get any rest, and then she has a really long day ahead of her. So she goes downstairs, she starts to open the store, but then she heads back up to her rooms and she sees something on her bed. It is a leather pouch and a note. The note says, "For wherever you need to go and then some. The world needs more healers." And then she opens the leather pouch to see that it is full of gold coins as well as the ruby brooch that Selena was wearing. So Urine took the note, she took the leather pouch, and she took what little belongings she had, and she walked right out of the White Pig and never looked back. Now we're going to jump to Celaena's POV. She is on a ship and she is sailing towards the Red Desert, but Celaena couldn't help but feel like the girl lost everything. She still remained to be one of the kindest souls and have such a strong moral compass. There's this moment where, and you'll hear about it more throughout the books, but Celaena refers to like feeling this tug on her heart, and then she decides to tug back, which means she basically decides to give into it. That is in the moment when she decided to leave as much gold as she possibly could. She basically gave Yrene everything she had except for what she needed to get where she needed to go. And then she also threw in the ruby brooch for her as well. So Celaena gave her like a lot, hoping that it would be enough to not only get her on the ship and to her end destination, but to pay for her education at the tour. Thank you for watching the entire plot of The Assassin's Blade short stories 1 and 2 with me. You can expect part 2 of short story number 3 this Friday, but for now you can subscribe and you can watch all of my other Sarah J. Maas videos while you wait.